Elaine, when your husband was killed, your children were 7 and 9.
Yes.
And a lot of the burden falls on the mum. And it must be a pretty tough time coping with your own grief and 2 young children. How was it?
It was difficult. The only way I can describe it, and I'm sure lots of people have, is it's just like being plunged into a hole and you're overcome with the grief, but you have to put that aside as a parent and concentrate on the children. I had lost my parents in my 20s. They both died in their 40s quite suddenly. So I had some idea of what the children would be going through. It's very disorientating. It's a loss, I think, unless you've lost a parent that you don't understand. It's not the same as losing a grandparent. It's your point of reference. So I knew in some ways how lost they would be feeling, how disorientated, and I needed to give the children the stability to get through it, to get through the journey that grief is, really. It is very difficult as a parent, and what I tended to do was I likened it to being a sponge. I just absorbed all their grief, because you have to be there to take everything from the children, and then when they went to school you just wring yourself out and start again, basically. That's your, if you can get 2-3 hours a day and you just, that's your grieving period, you sit aside and that's just your wailing at the wall time. But if you, I concentrated on the children, and that, it gives you a point and a purpose as well, because otherwise it's very easy to get lost in the circle of grief. You can go from sadness to anger, to sadness to bitterness to anger, and you can get yourself ensconced, I think, in a cycle. But if you have something to concentrate on, and the children were very much my purpose, I needed to make sure that they were getting through the day, that they felt safe, that they felt as if they had all the knowledge they needed, all the information that they needed to get them through, and to facilitate their grief, really, just to facilitate their pathway forward, whether that be with the school, health agencies, whatever, whoever I needed to be their go-between for. And that's the only way
What was the hardest part of it for you?
I think being alone, which is probably, I don't know if it's a singularly naval thing, but because we lived in Chester and Kevin was killed down in Portsmouth, you're very far away from all the support structure and the support network. I worked full time, so I had lots of contacts and a big support network in Chester, but I had no family. My parents were both dead, and although you're part of the naval family or the service family, we weren't. We were too far away. I think there are visiting officers that come back and forth to you if you're local to the area, but we were so far away. We're 4 or 5 hours from Portsmouth, or even from Helensburgh. So I think we were stuck in the middle, really, and we were just so alone.
Did you have a visiting officer?
No. When Kevin was killed, we found out, late on in the day, and Kevin's officer, his commanding officer, came the next day with a padre, took us all down to Portsmouth, and it was a very involved period then. We were down in Portsmouth for a week, going through post-mortems and body release and things like that. We came back up, but we had no real contact with anybody. I think because, again, we were so far away. There was a lady from the Navy came up who was an officer to fill in the forms from pensions and various official documentation, but that was all. We didn't have anybody who...
Was any bereavement support offered to you through the services?
None, absolutely none. That was the one thing that I managed to source. I think the services actually, I think it may have been NPFS, contacted my GP the day Kevin was killed, and he knew gosh, I think mid-afternoon, he found out before us, but he didn't want to come and tell me because he didn't have any details. They couldn't give him details. So he popped to the house the next morning and said to me, what can I do? I'm here, what would you need? And I said, I'll need some sort of counselling for the children. I knew from what I had been through some of the journey that was going to face them, and I said, I need some proper help with this. I need some guidance on what's going to happen here, because I was very aware that I didn't want to influence them with my grief or impose my projections, I suppose. This is how you should feel, because children's grief isn't like that at all. Yeah. So I was very aware that I would need some professional help there. So bless him, he managed to
sort that
organise some counselling and a way forward there.
Telling one's children that they've lost their father
was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life.
I'm sure.
That was worse than burying Kevin. That was worse than anything. I sat. They knew something was going on because a policeman had been to the house the night before. And then they were, best get ready for school time now. And I was like, it's okay, we're not going to school today, just have a seat. And I had to phone the school quickly and tell the school what had happened and notify them that we'd be away. Don't worry, we'd be back whenever we could. And to sit and tell them the difference in their reaction was poles apart, but harrowing nonetheless. Benjamin was very quiet. Benjamin just absorbed everything, took it all internally, and sat there very quietly and cried. Where Jessica wailed a scream that I will never forget. It will take me to the grave, that scream, from such a small child. She wailed from the depths of her soul. And there's nothing you can do at that point but hug them and tell them you love them, they're as safe as they can be. But you can't take away that grief from them. And as a parent, it's terrible. It's a terrible thing to have to inflict that on your child. You're the delivery point of that pain. And that's something that will never go away. Never, never go away.